Welcome to the Barry Broome Show. I am Mark Haney, and when you look up the phrase Sacramento business, what pops up is the picture of this guy. His name is Barry Broome, and underneath the picture is a quote, face down in the blood, right? All out, all in, face down in the blood. That's what you said to me as you were describing your leadership style the first time you came on the show, and that was probably about 6 years ago.
Yeah, and it's still face down in the blood.
It hasn't changed?
Yeah, no. And unfortunately, I've had more blood than I wanted, but it's still there.
Stuff happens. So when you walked into Sacramento originally, and one of the things we are teaching our startup community, and I think about this every day for myself and our businesses, is you got to get the big question right. What are you going to do with what you got? So you look around Sacramento and you're like, what am I going to do with what I got? What were you thinking, and how has Sacramento changed over the last how long have you been here? 6 years?
7 years? 6.5, yeah. Be 7 years in February. Hard to believe.
Wow.
Yeah, February was February 2015, so 7 years. Unbelievable, isn't it? How time has flown.
So you walk in and you're like, they warned me about this place, but it's true.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I will tell you, when you come out from out of town into the community, you're naturally going to look at the urban core, right?
Okay.
I mean, if you went to Detroit, you wouldn't go to Ann Arbor, see the University of Michigan. You'd go look at Detroit. You go kick the tires.
Would I bring security with me?
Yeah, you'd definitely in Detroit for sure. Yeah. Yeah, one of the things you learn in Detroit is it's okay to slowly run a red light. The people in Detroit slowly run red lights. It's more of a flashing light model. When you're clear, you get to go. And when I went into the community, Larry Allball, president of Buzzards, he always tells the story of he and I and Judd Riggs from Tykert. First time I sat down, they said I was like sweating, and they'd never seen a guy like me before. And one of the things, it's like anything when you're trying to challenge people. Sometimes you come off a little edgier. But one of the things that I told Judge and Larry, I said, hey, I've been through your town and you have a poorly served community, poorly served, poorly led community. And that's the first thing we got to get fixed, is that we don't, poorly serve and poorly lead the community. And then when you look at the community, because the community, the economy works from the inside out. Sac State, the airport, the urban core, the highest population concentrations. Then it works its way out to the Lincolns and the Rocklands and the El Dorado Hills, where, fortunately for us, really successful, affluent people live with money and education. And then you spur these really beautiful communities. But if you were to measure where most of the business starts are in the region and things like that, it's in the nodes. It's in Roseville, it's in Folsom, it's in Davis, it's in Sacramento. And so when I looked at it, I thought, who's led this community? Why isn't this community better than it should be? I think now I feel that way about myself. Am I doing enough? But I will say this. I've been stunned at the potential and the opportunities that I've seen in our community, to the favorable. And I think what happens is we're still learning how to realize the outcome, right? So this because you're a successful entrepreneur. When I started working with startups, one of the things a wise man once told me, it's easy to start one. Try to finish it and get it to make money.
Yeah.
What happens a lot of times in startup world, you start up. Well, you got to finish it, right? And I think, when I look at our community, how do we finish the potential off? How do we get out of startup phase into scale?
Okay.
Where we're finishers? How do we become closers? I was joking a little bit about the Kings. Kings look so good. Now they don't look so good. How's that happen? What is going on in the culture and the mindsets of the athletes on that team? That they can play so well for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games and then not be able to finish for 3, 4, 5, 6 games. A lot of that is a cultural attitude and a belief system. And, when you get used to losing and then it kind of becomes okay to lose, then it gets really easy to give in.
So when you started here, you accused us of being bad leaders, and you put us on. But you got hired for the job of Greater Sacramento, and you started this new thing, the GSAC, that we all know now. We sort of take it for granted, like it's been there 100 years, but it hasn't. And really, you rallied the leaders to come together to help economic development, and you've had a lot of wins. And then maybe share a couple of the wins, and then COVID hits, and then what did that do?
Yeah. So to me, our biggest wins have been in the last 6 months. HCL has chosen us, 700 software engineers from India. Mm-hmm. They're the Google of India. We don't know them by brand, but they're globally admired. We have a number of successful science companies that come here. One of them out of Menlo Park, Orca Bio, putting 400 researchers and $200 million in capital in the community. And we have literally every 2 weeks, we get shortlisted from an investment in a company that is more exciting than any company I saw in my first 2, 3, 4 years in the job. So the market is doing really well. The question, now you asked a question about COVID. Market's doing great. I mean, we got smart kids moving into Placer County and El Dorado Hills and Davis. Our own kids don't want to leave now, right? Just like, when you build a company, when you look at your portfolio of startups, I mean, you're looking at people between the ages of 28 and 32 that got 6, 7, 8 years maybe of business experience and leadership experience. Maybe they got some hard skills like finance and technology, but they're also ready to flex, right? They're ready to show some biceps and triceps and, bench 400 pounds. They're in the prime.
Yes.
They're ready to step out of being a young leader into being their own leader. And I think from a community standpoint, COVID has disrupted some of that civically and politically. I think there's a little PTSD, in every American after this. There's a little bit of a hangover. We're doing well, but it seems funny. It seems awkward a little bit, I think, still. I went from traveling all the time and meeting with people, 3, 4, 5 times a day and traveling 2, 3 days a week to I hadn't seen anybody in a year and a half. And it was a hard stop, March of 2020. So it was, so I have not worked with my employees since March of 2020.
They're working remotely.
They're working
for the most
remotely
part?
still,
Okay.
mm-hmm, and they're millennials, so they want to, and 2, they're hyper vigilant on the virus. So if your mask is below your nose, trust me, they're going to let you know. And they're very bright and talented, so we're very happy with our team. But I miss them. I miss the energy. We just. The camaraderie is a little affected by it. So it's bizarre. The organization's performing at an extremely high level. We're getting the best looks we've seen since I've been in the job. People are sticking and making investments.
Can I ask a question? Sorry to interrupt you. So when you say you're getting the best looks, maybe for our audience, who are the people looking? What type of people?
Microsoft, Salesforce.
They're looking to have a larger presence here.
Yeah, maybe an engineering division. So we hold out for divisions and units. I don't want to be a satellite office, because whenever a community becomes a satellite office, the first time the company catches a cold, they close the satellite office. A lot of times, too, satellite offices are pulling talent out of your town. So beware of the 25,000 square foot Google space. What they really want to do is pop into Davis, attach themselves to the engineering school, and pull, 1,500 kids a year out of our town. And meanwhile, you walk in and see them, they got 75 people there. Well, that doesn't count the 1,500 they're taking out of your town by putting a presence on a university setting. So I actually turned down Google, which I wondered if that was a mistake, but Google offered to put 25,000 square feet in Davis in 2015 in one of my meetings with them. And I said, no, thanks. I don't want you shifting our engineers to Seattle, Austin. And, if you want to put...
It's an interesting chess game there.
Yeah. So you want to put 500 in a division and put your, government tech digitalization team in, or the team that's working with food and ag, or the team that's working with healthcare, and I'll attach you to Kaiser and Dignity and give us 400 or 500 people. Now I got a division here. They're producing a product. They're producing a technology, and which is why we've been able to keep like EA Sports. They're actually built. That is a division that is in the ice blocks. They are a very specific gaming division that creates a very specific mobile device product for the company. They're not 12 engineers that are working on a platform in Redwood City.
So I'm diving a little bit deeper on this. So you're getting these looks, and as you were before the show, you and I were talking. You do, as part of your exercise, you do 15 presentations a week. I guess many of these are Zoom calls or that type of thing. So you do these; those are your reps, almost like you're a business development person or a sales rep, if you will, and you're doing them to these companies that might invest here or put businesses here. Is how much of your time, like what are you going to do with what you got? How much of your time do you devote to that type of outreach, like outside our area?
It's probably a third of my time.
Okay.
And what I want to make sure I do, first off, I think you got to lead by example. So whenever you're running a nonprofit economic development organization, I mean, my team's average age is probably 32, 33. So they still have, so if I tell a business development guy, I want you making 15 presentations a week, and that's their job. And they go, that's a lot of presentations. And I go, yeah, I'm the president and CEO, and that's how many I'm making. And then I'm managing our board and working with investors and guiding our communities and making external appearances and overseeing our audits and our finances. So you can make that many presentations if that's the only job you got.
I would think so.
Yeah. So some of it is a little bit of a stage setting for the younger business development people, that if I can run the entire organization, manage all the external obligations, handle the press and the politics, and I can do 15, then I expect you to do 15.
And somebody teased those up for you, though, by the way. Yeah,
yeah,
because people are calling to get an appointment with you, and I'm sure, hey, you're a busy man. You can't talk to every single person in society that thinks about that Googles you.
Yeah, and the key thing, what we do, which is now we're going to be so efficient and so productive, because now we got our model figured out. So we're no different than any other organization, right? So the natural instinct when I came into town, Rob Lynch, VSP, Pat Fry, these Bay Area companies want to come up here. If somebody will just go down and talk to them and make it easier for them to come here, they'll do that. And I don't know if I ever gave you this number, but I made 2,135 one-on-one face-to-face presentations between San Francisco and San Jose. That is a God's truth.
Wow.
Yeah.
In what period of time?
It was like 2015 to first quarter 2018.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. And I mean, some of them were the custodians, you know what I mean? I mean, the associate director of Twitter,
Are those starting to pay fruition? Because now Sacramento, I think some of it had to do with COVID, right? We're a great place to live, especially well, I don't want to take away from anywhere in Sacramento, but I live out here in Placer County in El Dorado Hills, and we can see it in the housing market that people are flooding into moving next door to all of us.
Yeah.
People want to live here where they can have a yard versus maybe San Francisco.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think so first off, I think where it has paid off is it hasn't changed the investment trend of those companies down there yet. What it's done, though, it's changed how they talk about us. Because when I first went down there, they didn't talk about us very favorably. There was a guy, Sand Hill, I'll call him Biff. And
on Sand Hill Road.
Yeah.
That's Venture Capital Road.
Yeah.
Right?
And this guy, looked like he was born with a polo shirt and a tennis racket in his hands. And, I was, going to these networks and just, cold call, press in the flesh as the new CEO of this organization. And just people were very arrogant and rude. And I walked to this guy, shook him, gave him my card. He literally didn't take his hands out of his pocket. He leaned over and looked at my card, and it said, Greater Sacramento. He goes, oh, Sacramento. He goes, yeah, I'm pretty sure I don't need that card.
Wow.
And he was within 7 seconds of being hit with a blast double leg take. I mean, I wanted to put that guy through the wall. I still do. I'm sure that was my 3rd month in the job. You know, like if I'm in a bad mood, I go lingering. Yeah, I go lingering around Sand Hill Road looking for the guy. But that was literally where we started, and that's not the case now. We have good access to the VC community, which, as you know, the Bay Area and Silicon Valley does invest in our community. They are doing follow-on investing here now. And the young people are moving here. And, you know, even though we haven't gotten a Google, Facebook, Salesforce landing here, certainly Google, Salesforce, Microsoft take us very seriously. And we do know we're in the queue in those companies now. And I think after COVID, they're still trying to figure out what to do with their own HR needs. So, you know, Google required everybody to come back to the office. And there's a word on the street is they lost 10 to 20% of their engineers doing that. You know, Facebook's not requiring anybody to come in. Twitter's not requiring anybody to come in. So, you know, you got all these, basically, guesses going on HR. Yeah. But I think we're going to do very well economically within that relationship. So what we've become is companies like HCL, which would have been in San Francisco 3 years, in a partnership with Google, when they're talking to Google now saying, we don't know if we want to come down to the Bay Area and pay the freight and deal with the chaos. Google's now saying, we don't actually have to be here. Have you looked at Sacramento?
Wow.
Because we've had some presentations from those guys, and they're starting to head in the right direction. So that's been the change. Google's not up here, but Google partners and suppliers get good feedback from Google. And Microsoft, literally, we've had the global head of R&D from Microsoft and the global head from real estate. We know they go on our site and pull our data down. They just never take our calls. You know, so it's like we know they're looking at us because literally they pull lifestyle stuff off our website. You know, we have our own software program that scrubs who goes in it, but we've never been able to get any real penetration with them, but we know they're looking at our work. But Google, if I reached out to Google right now and said, I want to give you an update. So we do what we call familiarization. Because, these guys want to avoid a closed situation, right? You know how that works. So we just get up and say, hey, you get a relationship with Google. We've got a really good one with Salesforce. We just want you to take a 30-minute phone call from us every quarter and take an update so that we're front of mind. And so they do that now.
Interesting. I was on a panel actually with Denton Kelly pre-pandemic, and we were getting the question, what does Sacramento need? And one thing that he said that stood out to me, and I wonder if you would agree or if he would still agree with this. He said Sacramento needs to have a brand. We need to be known as something. I've seen certain, we've all seen Farm to Fork and Government Cowtown and the Sacramento Kings. There's these sort of areas, these clusters that might have formed at some level, but when you're going around or on one of your Zoom calls, are we perceived as a government cowtown that's emerging as a tech town, or have we established a brand, or is that even on the radar at this point?
Yeah, first off, I think, community brands are really just about the hardest thing to form.
Okay.
And so when you think of Austin, if you look at Austin's brand today, that was their brand in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I mean, Austin has this incredible kind of funky swag, country and Western arts culture. It goes back to the 30s.
It does,
you know. So when you think of Austin and music and cool and Texas and hip, that's the way they were in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. They sort of ended up being acknowledged for what they've always been.
Yeah, but then you've got the Dell influence and a couple of the other big tech companies.
The Dellionaires.
All the Dellionaires. I was actually partners with some Dellionaires on a security camera company back in Austin, and so I have a little bit of a sense as to how that area has changed, and I'm wondering sort of like what you see in Sacramento as an emergence, because it feels like we're coming. Obviously, we haven't had a big Dell. We don't have a Dell in our backyard, but we do have something. It isn't nothing.
Yeah, I think, so, a lot of this is, so if you look at brands, everybody, one of our biggest challenges is how divergent we are culturally and politically. I mean, we're an incredibly complicated place. So if you go to Austin, it's not that complicated. Austin, you go to Phoenix, it isn't very complicated. I was in Phoenix 10 years. Whether you're in the city of Phoenix or if you're in Mesa, if you're in Tempe, you're kind of the same thing. The Democrats are libertarians and the Republicans are libertarians. You know, the Democrats are libertarians and they're a little more civil rights oriented, and the Republicans are libertarians, they're a little bit long. But everybody's a libertarian in Arizona. Nobody wants a big government. Nobody wants the government to tell them what to do, and that's both Democrat and Republican. So you could get an alignment there because the culture was the same. Everybody wanted jobs. Everybody wanted growth. You didn't have an anti-growth faction in the Democrats and a pro-business faction in the Republicans. You know, so part of the challenge around here is in order to get kind of a rhythm and a theme for who we are, you're going to need alignment and compliance to that across the board. And then internally, we can't be provincial about it. So, for instance, I know for a fact Davis feels like the city of Sacramento has tried to take the Farm to Fork mantle from them because they're the true Farm to Fork city. But the fact of the matter is, out of respect to Farm to Fork, I've traveled internationally, and I do ask, and I ask all the time, do you know where the Farm to Fork capital is? I mean, no one has ever, even in San Francisco, no one has ever said Sacramento's a Farm to Fork place, even though we really are. I mean, we are truly a Farm to Fork community. But if you go on the website or go on the internet and Google Farm to Fork communities, you'll find out there's 185 communities out there calling themselves the Farm to Fork capital, right? So I never use an initial around technology, ITT, TTI, UTI. It's like, man, those are all over the place. You got to come up with something different. What we are, quite honestly, is we are an elite, world-class science community. We're really scientists. So if you're really thinking about what is this place called Greater Sacramento or Sacramento, it is a world-class, world-renowned, breathtaking scientific community on par with Boston, San Diego, San Francisco, Toronto, Tokyo, London, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Maryland, anybody. We're as good as any place in the world at science.
And what's the heart of that? Is that Davis?
That's Davis.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not only that, but it's like, it's just, science is interesting. Communities have these histories. So when I was in Michigan and I was the CEO of South, you have horse whisperers. I used to think of myself, I'm older now, so I don't have as much arrogance about my abilities, a little more humble. But I used to think I was like a community whisperer. Like if people just wouldn't talk, I could sit down on a log and hear what the community was. I can almost sense it. And I can kind of do that a little bit from doing this. So when I was in Michigan and that whole economy was collapsing, how are you going to rebuild a place that's totally collapsing? And I sat down and listened to Southwest Michigan. And I joked about it. I said, what we really are is we find doctors and we become billionaires. So Kellogg, which you've heard of, was really a homeopathic doctor, and everybody became billionaires in Southwest Michigan. Well, the Upjohn Company, which became Pfizer, they were doctors. Everybody became billionaires. Stryker, which the successful medical device company, they were founded by doctors, and everybody became billionaires. And then there were little stories where like cousins got in fights and moved to Indianapolis, and that's how Biomet was actually started in Kalamazoo and moved to central Indiana because the cousins got in a fight over the early seed round in 1978, and that became a multi-billion-dollar company in like Anderson, Indiana or someplace, right? But that originated in Kalamazoo. So I joked, saying, I know what I got to do. What are you going to do to fix it? We just got to go find doctors and turn them into billionaires. Right. And in a way, it worked. So if you look at Southwest Michigan now in Kalamazoo, they have dozens and dozens of really cool, small, compelling life science company that has a physician either as the chief technical officer or the founder in that formula, and there was something instinctive about it. So if you look at, we were just talking about the milk technology coming out of UC Davis,
right.
The gut technology coming out of there. These guys are like Star Trek, man. I mean, these guys are supersonic thinkers. And every time you turn around, there's some, unheard of breakthrough, unbelievable scientific achievement coming out of UC Davis. And it like happens every 15 minutes. But for some reason, that doesn't translate in our minds like it should. Mm-hmm. I don't know how do we get more inspired? That's one of the questions I'm starting. Why? I have, I'm an inspired guy. If you told me, hey, I met a guy who's 10 times the leader you are in the field of economic development and inspiring communities, I mean, that might cause me to lose 40 pounds. You know what I mean? I may go to graduate school to try to catch that guy. You know, I don't know how do we do that?
You know what I'm inspired by? I'm inspired by acts of courage. People that put everything out there, like an uncommon level of commitment. I don't care if it's entrepreneurship. It could be on the football field. It could be on the wrestling mat. When you see that uncommon courage of commitment to fully commit, I'm like, how do I help that guy?
Yeah.
You know, and if I'm not in a position to help, I'm at least inspired. And maybe I go do it. It gives me a little bit of like, what am I doing? I better step my game up, man.
Yeah. I'm doing that right now with Gina Lujan at Hacker Lab. Gina Lujan has offered up an internal organ to get that thing off the ground and to keep it alive during COVID. So I agreed to chair her foundation.
And for anybody listening, Hacker Lab is a makerspace that has kind of a co-working element to it. And obviously during COVID, nobody wants to go get together and build stuff together.
Right. So I went through her financials and gave her, sometimes you got to learn to play another day. Let's wind this maybe down. And it was pretty clear to me that, she was going to put a Volkswagen on her back and run with me or without me. She was not going to do that no matter what the odds were. So, okay, well, kind of what you said, well, if you're that committed to it, then I'll chair your foundation and I'll do everything I can to help you get back on your feet and pull that off. Because she sees that as, her responsibility to her employees, to her clients, to her mission. But, she also sees a lot of her own personal pride in the fact that she built that, and she doesn't want to let it go, even if it's coming at great expense or pain to her. And I think that's an example of, okay, hey, I'm going to help Gina Lujan, and I'm going to ask other people in the community to do that too, because she's laying it on the line. We don't lay it on the line. That you just came exactly to, and that Lombardi quote. I wish I had it.
Ain't over till it's over. No, what is it?
No, the more it's basically if you can't yield if you give everything.
Yeah.
Now you yield. We yield. MLS is a great example of yielding. In my opinion, we yielded to that. But who had what on the line outside of Kevin Nagel? So we weren't in deep enough. So when that got hard and that got complicated, it was easier to mimic rhetoric. Billionaire's going to fly into town here one day and save us. I hate the billionaire out of town model. But there wasn't enough on the line. So if you look at Aggie Square, why is Aggie Square going to make it and continue to go forward? By the time we ran into all that opposition at Aggie Square, which was unfortunate, engineered, unhealthy, not organic, not from the neighborhoods, it was outside pros coming in to interfere with the market. But Gary May had too much on the line. I had too much on the line. Daryl Steinberg had too much on the line. Wexford had too much on the line. We had too much on the line to fold, so those leaders marched and worked through it. And the same thing with the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. I mean, when I came here, I had a lot on the line. If you think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had a really good national reputation. I left a 10-year CEO job in Phoenix. I had had two kids in college, one in high school, and I walked in here at 53 years of age, not knowing anybody, just Kevin Johnson and Rob Lynch and Pat Fry and a couple of guys, and said, okay, hey, let's do this. Well, that was, and I think you saw how I worked on it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably why we follow you.
Yeah.
To me, that's what happened with Greater Sacramento, and I think that's what's happening with the Growth Factory. That's what inspired me to do the Growth Factory. I wanted to share the stories of entrepreneurship originally, and I've been doing that. Wanted to share the stories of winning and sacrifice and going all in, and started writing checks to startups and helping them through angel investing and so on. And then it became like, this is fun. There's something that you and I are probably close to the same age, and it's inspiring to be around people who are starting companies, which really means you're putting it all out on the line. You're putting their reputation on the line, everything, working crazy hours, and often hurting certain relationships and things in order to figure out a way to do something important in their life. And it's like, man. And because, and this is kind of interesting comparison to Aggie Square and MLS from the out-of-town billionaire guy, we're homegrown. We're the mentors that are coming on to help us are people who have built and sold companies. They live here. The investors that are coming in, we're going to have 99 investors in the Growth Factory. It's going to be people that care about their community.
Yeah.
It's like it's real money. It's real time and effort on local startups so that we all can live vicariously through these success stories. And you see how hard they work. It's like, man, I need to step up my game. Again, I say it every day when I see them.
Yeah, and that's to me, so I was with, my chairman right now is Mike Guyette.
Oh, yeah.
He's the president and CEO of VSP. And great guy and self-made guy, comes out of Providence, Rhode Island, was in the Army. It took him 7 years to get his bachelor's degree. He went into the Army, blue collar.
And he comes
kid.
in charge of VSP, huh? Crazy.
Yeah, they have 21,000 employees now, and he's the president and CEO. And one of the things he and I talked about yesterday is, and I've been talking to the CEOs about this, like, hey, we got to lean in here, man. Just because we're okay doesn't mean our community's okay. And we got to lean in. I always, one of the things I always talk about leadership is, once you raise your hand and say you're a leader, you don't get to put it back down. You got to keep it in the air. You don't get to step back, when things are murky or scary. And I think that's like right now. I always tell folks I've never seen the government fix a problem in my life. My entire life, I've never seen it. I wish they could. I'd give them more money if they could fix some problems. And I'm not saying government doesn't matter, but I just have never seen them solve a problem. I never have. Not in my life. I've never seen a mayor solve a problem in my life. All the problems I've ever seen solved in my life came from civically engaged communities. It's Mark Haney and the Growth Factory. It's the Carlson Center. It's Robert Nelson leaning in. It's Aggie Square. It's Wexford. It's Kevin Nagel going after Major League Soccer. It's the Angel Investor Network. It's the board of the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. Those are the institutional leadership models that lead to action and lead to solutions and lead to solving problems. And that's what we're poised to do. So while, we're seeing lots of instability in Washington, D.C., we're seeing lots of instability in the state capital of California. Right? We just came off of a recall. The urban core is very unstable with the politics and the homeless problem. Yet there's 45 CEOs at the Greater Sacramento. I mean, we're making pitches and presentations today. And I've got 2 people in LA talking to e-mobility companies. I've got somebody in Seattle. I got a presentation this afternoon. So while there's all this instability under the political leadership, the civic leadership is very stable, on the ground, head down, taking action. Now we're going to rally behind the Growth Factory, right? And then, and the other thing too is, communities are like sharks. If they're not moving forward, they're dying. There is no such thing as standing still. There is no such thing as maintenance. If you're standing still or catching your breath or acting in a way of maintenance, you're going backwards because you're competing with people that are moving forward. And so to me, I'm talking to my board like, hey, we got to take a big risk in 2022, a big, high-profile, disruptive risk. What's it going to be, right? I don't mean the California Mobility Center or Aggie Square or the Growth Factory. But I mean something that literally tips or upends the current cultural challenges in our community.
Is there agreement? Is there consensus? Are people rallying around that idea of upending something yet? Not yet.
But, because part of it is, the interesting thing about our community is we only have so much, so this is the challenge with a government town. It's the continuity and sameness that comes from it, right? And then, what do we develop our affection for? We have an affection for all these quaint historical things. Like Old Sacramento is a great example. You try to redevelopment and somehow 500 people show up at a city council meeting. They don't want it to be redeveloped. And then when you go walking through it, all you keep thinking of is, wow, why are you letting such a huge asset like this go to waste? But yet, we're attached to that. People in our community are attached to that for different reasons. Where their grandpa walked them down the boardwalk in 1977. It's, the fact that it's kind of funky and underperforming is part of the romance. So there's the thing that, it's like anything. Your strength is always your weakness, right? That's the first thing you learn. If you're an intense, aggressive guy, well, that's your strength. Well, you may topple over somebody or disrupt the relationship you need with that very same style. So out of balance, it will become your weakness, right? So strength and balance is what you want to be. You don't want your strength to overwhelm everything, because you'll start managing the weaknesses that come from your strengths being out of balance. And I think the strength of our community is just the collegial, generous, warm, careful, conscientious way in which we all treat each other, which I appreciate very much, being somebody that moved here. And I love it here, and this has been a fantastic community for me and my family, and I'm grateful for the generosity of people. But challenging ourselves to make ourselves better. I call it the Draymond Green model. If you watch, Golden State, evidently Kevin Durant didn't like Draymond putting his foot in his what. But there's a reason why those guys got 3 world championships, and probably will get another one. It's because, not just because they're great players, but they got somebody down there that's setting the tone for the intensity at which they compete, who's not their best player, because that's Clay and Steph, but that's the leader. I don't think Golden State wins anything without Draymond Green. Because who's getting them to dive for loose balls? Who's getting them to move their feet? Who's getting them to do the dirty work that you got to do on the edges to be a championship team? And I think in our own community, how do we translate the strength of our community, which is this genteel, collegial friendship nature, into where we trust each other enough to where we can challenge each other to be better leaders and push the envelope?
Well, I think we have to get them to decide to be that way, to do something together, unite in some way. And one of the dreams that I've shared with you about economic development is around the amount of venture capital that comes into our region. According to some data, Crunchbase and so on, Sacramento is not getting nearly the venture capital dollar that Austin and some other, other cities our size are getting. And that I think last year we got like $250 million put into Sacramento. And I know that in the Sacramento region, I know this year it's improving. Success is breeding success. But I feel like we should have a united dream. It shouldn't be the Mark Haney dream or just the Barry Broome dream. We should be able to get $1 billion. If Austin can get close to $2 billion, we can get $1 billion worth of venture money put into Sacramento every year, which is other people's money, right? Other people's money coming into our community and helping drive our economic growth, helping us to create our own opportunity, and not being the next Silicon Valley or San Francisco, being the best Sacramento. Let's take these good-hearted people and be the best good-hearted people in the world right here.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is to be, a successful community, right? And to be and to be the best version of ourselves. But when you think about that best version, that gets into like an aspiration, though, right? Like one of the things that one of the things when I first came in that would bother me was how many people in our community was okay. So this started me going down to the Bay Area, and if you know Michelle Willard, she's in Lincoln, and she's our head comms person, and she came. I hired her out of the Placer County Women's Alliance. I hired her out of the audience. So she's my chief comms and public affairs person. Yeah. Brittany Jones is my chief performance officer. I hired her out of my going away party in Phoenix. I mean, I get a pretty good knack for that. And both of them are powerhouse women, But when I would sit down with Michelle, if somebody writes a smart-ass comment about Sacramento, we take the gloves off on them. And so, you got the normal thing, the San Jose Mercury. And then there'd be some article out there, and you can track this, and they just... Things are so bad around here. My God, we could become Sacramento one day. When I would go down and make those 2,135 presentations, I would go to the Mercury news desk and ask for a meeting with the reporter that put that one sentence in an opinion piece. And I would come in and give them a card and say, why do you talk that way about my community? And, we turned a lot of that around. I don't know, because, that's a small world. But if the San Francisco Business Journal made some snarky statement and they threw Sacramento's name in it, she'd give them a muscle call. And when I was down there making presentations, I would stop by the newspaper and ask for a meeting with the reporter that wrote it. I don't care if it was a 3-sentence statement. I would sit down and go, why are you writing bad things about my community? Well, it was, it was kind of an intimidation tactic. Mm-hmm. But you know what? They quit doing it. And then after a while, they started writing good stuff about us. And one of the things, if you go down to San Francisco or Silicon Valley, you talk to a kid and try to see if it works. Because I say, hey, have you ever thought of moving into the Sacramento? Yeah, I have been thinking about that. My friends have moved it. That happens to me all the time. And these are the little things I do, little tests I do when I'm out. But if I'm in the Bay Area and I'm, getting a beer and the person behind me that's handing the beer to me is 24 years old and got a towel on their hip, I just go, hey, where are you from? Have you ever thought of moving to Sacramento? And I will tell you, every single time I get, I've been thinking about that because I got two friends that moved up there and they're saying it's kind of a cool town.
That is inspiring. Well, it's happening, and I with the Growth Factory, we saw this opportunity during COVID to, help create more venture backable startups so we could attract that dollar. But I feel like as a region, adopting a vision or an aspiration around $1 billion is a big round number, and it's a lot more than what we're getting today. I feel like one of the things that you do when you have a dream like that, it gives you a North Star, and you can start putting it in the plan, right? And so in your plan in 2021, I was at the retreat with you. Thank you very much for inviting me out there. In the plan, you talked about tradable sectors, right?
Yeah.
These are venture backable, potentially, sectors. Mm-hmm. Could you elaborate on why those are valuable? It's a catchy term, tradable sector, venture capital. Okay, yeah, but what's it all do when it happens?
Okay, so first off, this is part of the educational experience for the community, right? And, so if you look at the government, which is, 22% directly of our economy, it was 25. Or 27, so we've dropped it from 27 to 22, right? We want to get it down to 14 or 13. So if you get the government down to being about 13% of your economy, you're now like Columbus, Ohio, or Indianapolis. You're a mid-tiered, healthy market with a normal relationship economically with
and
your
you want to grow your way into that ratio.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind cutting the hair a little bit on the other one too. I do have some.
For all you state workers out there,
I want you to get your pensions, but I do want some slowing on the growth of that model, right? So now, so how do you go from 22 to 14? What is the actual number, right? So we know that's between 24 to 32,000 net new tradable sector jobs in this region we need to build, create, attract, or originate, right? And so when you look at government and you look at healthcare, how do you affect healthcare? You can't affect healthcare. It's 20% of our economy. It's tied to your population base. And it's kind of tied to these government workers, right? Now, you can make healthcare more efficient by giving them the right nurses and lab technicians and make it easier for them to operate. We want to make sure they're maxed out. But other than inhibiting their current market position, it's just tied to 2.4 million people and who's got a good healthcare plan, right? Yeah. So now you look at food and ag, well, that you can actually do something about that, right? You can create a world food center, right? Yeah. So you can create a milk technology or an origin materials, right? Something can come out of UC Davis in the food and agricultural side, and it can become a bare crop science.
You bet. And these clusters end up forming and helping one another.
Yeah. So part of that, So the tradable set, first off, it's the only part of the economy you can control. You can't save the pizza parlor in Rockland. You can't save the barber shop in Lincoln. You can't save the insurance salesman in Roseville. You can't save Frank Fats. We're either going to go to Frank Fats and eat the food. Frank Fats has got to be good enough to hold their balance sheet during the downturn. If Golden One closes and it never opens, and Frank Fats downtown's going to feel it. Frank Fats in Roseville needs Westfield Mall, right? So if you can give Frank Fats $100,000 every 6 months, and it won't have an effect on whether or not Frank Fats makes it. If you give Anna Strauss $100,000, she can turn that into 50, 100 employees and start to bring a different kind of culture to your economy.
Anna's building a tech platform that helps employee engagement. Right. And if they're based out of your hometown with people making six figures, that supports Frank Fats.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's how. So if you want to help Frank Fats in Westfield Mall, then you need the Growth Factory, and you need to back the Greater Sacramento Economic Council economic platform, because that's where you can actually affect change. So if we start producing, so if William Jessup starts becoming world-class at producing software engineers, well, they're going to walk over to the Growth Factory and join a startup.
Yes.
And up and out of the ground are they going to come, right? And then if that ends up being a technology that the California Department of Revenue adopts, all of a sudden that technology is expanded into not only the state government of California, but now the state of New York can use that technology. The state of Illinois can use that technology. And all of a sudden you go into Rockland and Lincoln, and what are these 200 engineers doing here? And this kid came out of William Jessup, and this kid cut his teeth at Sierra, and these two kids came over from Sac State, and Growth Factory gave them $100,000, and they designed a software program to make the government more efficient. So they're lowering the tax obligations of the government, making products and services better for the government, but they can replicate that model in other states. Therefore, they can trade their technology.
Well, let's pull out a crystal ball here for a minute, because we only have a few minutes left, but I want to make sure you are a visionary. You can paint me a picture of what Sacramento, from an economic standpoint, is going to look like. You've been doing this 6.5 years. 6.5 years from now, we've shifted. We still have a little bit of a hangover from COVID, but we're coming out of that. And I think it sounds like there's even in your opinion and those sort of in my world, there's starting to become a little bit of momentum. We're starting to get our feet under ourselves again, and things are starting to rock. But paint me a picture of what it will look like if we can kind of get over this hangover pretty quick, barring the unforeseen.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a science triangle between Woodland, Davis, and Sacramento now that Aggie Square is there. You're going to see, so Woodland's got a 235-acre research park that they're putting out into the market. And we got to do it right? This gets into, we got to grow up and start doing things the right way and not trip and stumble when we try to make moves. So that's got to go in the hands of a Blackstone-backed Kilgore caliber group. That's got to be somebody that's going to come in, put $50, $100 million of infrastructure into that park, and have the balance sheet to manage it, right?
And so there'll be a triangle. Let me slow this down a little bit. Between where?
Woodland, Davis,
right,
and Sacramento.
And then do they connect? You got these centers.
Yeah, and they will be connected. They will be interconnected. So if I'm a veterinarian scientist, I'm going to be at Mace Road. If I'm a medical scientist, I'm going to go to downtown Sacramento and be at Aggie Square. If I'm a food and agricultural scientist, I'm going to go over to Woodland.
Okay.
But what's going to start to happen is, as those three things start to scale, you're going to start to see Berkeley, which, if you think about Woodland, right? So the number one public university in America is Cal Berkeley. The number 5 is Davis. Woodland is, 55 miles from Cal Berkeley and 5 miles from Davis. So now Woodland's research park is really going to be, do you want to integrate, commercialize,
drawing from
the two of the number 1 and the number 5 public university in the United States, right? And then Mace Road, the veterinarian school's never been tapped. So when you think about what a driver of the medical school, the veterinarian school at UC Davis is every bit as big. It's just trapped in an unimagined environment, and that's what Gary May's doing now at Aggie Square, right? He's reimagining the role of UC Davis. And what's going to happen is the success at Aggie Square is going to motivate the success in Woodland and Mace Road, because now people are going to see it, right? It's like a confidence factory. Why do you have a startup scene? 6, 7, 8 startups, they're all at the business plan level doing a minimum viable product. They're all struggling. They're all trying to get their first $200,000. They see themselves as peers, and somebody comes back from a meeting with $1.1 million drawn down, right? And now all of a sudden they're thinking, whoa.
Yeah, if that guy can do
that
it.
Guy can, yeah, exactly. And that's what's going on with Mace Road right now. The reason the city of Davis, their number 1 priority is the research park at Mace Road, is they're a little out of joint that there's a $2.2 billion project with all the attention of the University in Sacramento. And that's okay, because that's the kind of competition you want between the communities, a rising tide competition. Well, we're Davis, and if this Sacramento city crowd can inspire Wexford and $2.2 billion, we're not going to let our university be more dedicated over the causeway than here. That's your big brother, getting ticked off when the little brother, pins him in a wrestling match, Yeah.
Okay, so beyond the triangle, we got the triangle is happening.
Yeah, I would say that, and I think the other one is, and by the way, where those real estate developments are going to inspire South Placer County. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I'm doing in Placer County now is when people come in to redesign real estate or buy land, like Panettone, which I should have. I should have probably been earlier on in the Panettone development. That should be a life science development. They should be developing a 200-acre bioscience, life science research park, because what will happen at Woodland and Mace and Sacramento is they will come out of those sites emerging like Origin did. Then they're going to scale. Where are they going to go in their scale? Aggie Square is only 10 acres. So when these companies come out, they're going to look for a home in town. So Aggie Square is going to be a nerve center of a scientific intellectual exchange. It's not going to be where they're going to be long term.
Right.
So now these companies go to El Dorado Hills, they go to Folsom, they go to Roseville, and they start populating the region economically. I think electric vehicles and hydrogen and carbon-free mobility is the other industry. Now, we got to get out of our own way on that right now. We're politicizing that project right now. We got too many hands in it, which is what we do. We got to kind of clean that up, pull it out, and get it back on track.
Well, that's SMUD and the Mobility Center.
Yeah, SMUD, Sac State, UC Davis.
And how many? If we scrape back to politics, what companies are forming there? We have. Right?
We have like 50.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of great
we have 90,
seeds being planted.
We have 90 in line talking to us.
Yeah.
But the problem's going to be is, it's just like you got to have the fund. And then, we got to get a little cash to 250.
Yeah.
You got to have the there, right?
Yes.
Now they're coming to the dance.
If you build it, hopefully they come.
Yeah, they will come. And then when they come, you better build it, right? So we're a little bit on the there,
okay.
right? So we need a $10 million capital investment to scale the physical infrastructure. Because what it really is, it's a hardware engineering design model to prototype and build hardware for these modern new mobility technologies. The software is in Silicon Valley, right? So, Uber is so valuable because it's really the operating system for what people think connected and autonomous vehicles are going to do. So all the software is down in the Bay Area. Ford, the Japanese and Chinese companies are down in the Bay Area. Well, where's the hardware play going to be? The hardware play needs to be here. So now Sac State's engineering school becomes world-class as a hardware player in e-mobility. UC Davis has a mobility expertise. It moves into it. And then the regulators, which have created this industry out of climate change objectives, is sitting 1.2 miles from the California Mobility Center, and somehow they've got to embed their vision and view through us. So, that will be... And by the way, those two things can drive this entire economy.
Yes.
Because
make those work.
Yeah, those
along with the growth
yeah,
factory.
Yeah, those are 100. Yeah, but those are 100,000 jobs right there.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do 50,000 life science jobs and 50,000 e-mobility jobs, and you can have 100,000 tradable sector jobs, right? And what are they going to do? Frank Fatz is going to go through the roof. Future Ford's going to be selling more cars. My buddy Roger Nilo is going to be selling cars. Yes. More good kids are going to go to Sac State. More houses are going to be bought in Rockland, and that whole economic system is going to go up, and it's high valued. So what are you going to end up doing? You're not going to be buying Chevys. You're going to get to buy a Beamer. You're going to buy a $650,000 house. So the value. So the government town creates little external value, and it suppresses all the other economic indicators, and it clouds our judgment in thinking we need it. And so what do? We couch our conversations politically because we want to be able to have access to these governments because we've trained ourselves to think these governments are going to provide some kind of solution versus not thinking that way. We're going to provide and liberate our own solutions. We're going to do that out of the grit and courage of our own civic society. And, we're happy to have functioning governments, But I don't want to see my community led or run by the government ever. And all you got to do is watch. And I don't care who's running the government, whether it was, Trump's 2020 or Biden's 2021. I don't want to put my eggs in either one of those baskets, but I'll put them in Mark Haney's baskets, and I'll put them in Dale's, and I'll put them in Dave Lucchetti's, and I'll put them in Gary May's, and I'll put them in Robert Nelson's, and I'll put them in Kevin Nagel's. I'll put them in Larry Allball's. Everybody on my board and every one of my partners, I would put my reputation and my future in their hands.
Yeah. Well, I love the agreed, great people, and obviously committed to this effort, or they wouldn't be, working alongside you. But I love the idea of these platforms, basically, that create. You're taking a lot of shots on goal when you've got the mobility center or the triangle or the growth factory. Look, they don't. Every company that comes through there doesn't have to work, but you're not betting on like one huge employer, state of California or a Google even, or somebody else, who did we try to get here? Amazon. We're not betting on this home run. We're betting on these small ones, and we're building the platform where the small ones can succeed, and then they'll become big, and they're committed to the community.
Yeah, and we're betting on ourselves, not an out-of-towner, right? That old saying, bet on a man that bets on himself. It's probably politically incorrect, but I like it.
Bet on a person.
Bet on a person that bets on themselves. Yeah. And that's what we're learning to do, bet on ourselves. And the other thing, too, I had lunch with Harry Elliott. Do you know Harry? He's a great guy. Elliott Holmes.
Okay, well, I know of him.
Yeah, he's a terrific guy. So I'm sitting out there like, where'd you go to school? Like UCLA. Where did you get graduate work? Haas, Cal. It's like, if you think about those two credentials that Harry has, a UCLA Anderson School graduate, and then a Haas MBA, if you go, there's entire states that don't have anybody that sharp. And we got guys like that we don't even think of as juggernauts, because Harry's a low-key guy and he's a humble man, and they're sitting right in Folsom. A guy that really, has incredible means, incredible character, incredible integrity, but also incredibly bright. And I always say that, to a lot of people around here. I've never been anywhere where, Stanford and Cal guys are just hanging around in the room, and this one went to UCLA, and of course our own institutions, UC Davis and Sac State. We don't see that as a really high-powered differentiating opportunity and achievement because it's common to us. But I assure you, that is not common in Cleveland. That is not common in Detroit. That is not common in Indianapolis or Louisville or Lexington. And it's probably not that common in Denver and Salt Lake and it's not common in Phoenix. It's great to be a Sun Devil, but, no offense to my friends back in Arizona. That isn't the same thing as being a UCLA or a Cal guy. Right. And we've got tens of thousands of these incredibly sophisticated, highly educated thinkers in our community in all walks of life, and law firms, and practicing medicine and selling insurance and owning a restaurant. And they have the ability to they have the ability to change the entire trajectory of this community by seeing themselves as responsible for it.
Yeah. Put your money where your town is. They are doing that, but if we could rally the entire community around, put your money where your town is, bet on yourselves, bet on us, bet on the fact that we need to help our neighbor. And I'm not just simply saying give it away, invest it.
Yeah. And things like, in my conversation with Google, LinkedIn data, 2,100 people grew up in this community and they have a job at Google. And Google, if you said, Google, what about Sacramento? They don't have any town, right? And I think I gave you this data, but it's one of my favorite LinkedIn data points because we scrub all these data points because that's what people will tell me, right? Well, Google will tell me that. You don't quite have the time. Well, you have 2,100 of us working for you right now. So what would be so outrageous to suggest you should put your government tech division into my community and work next to the second largest government in the United States? Instead, you're going to pull 2,100 kids out of my town, drag them down to your town, pay a premium for them, and then they're going to live in a studio with 3 of their friends. Or you could just be here and be more sustainable as a company and as a community. The other data point that to give you the potential, between San Francisco and San Jose, there are 15,000 people who are CEOs of emerging companies of under 100 employee who either graduate from UC Davis or Sac State. There's 15,000 of them. What would happen if those 15,000 people were here with their companies.
Yeah.
You'd be Austin.
Yeah.
You'd be one of the most talked about communities. So it's right beneath us. And I think what happens is, like-minded people, right? So the more aspirational we are, Rhombus Systems is a great example. Trifecta, Zenify, Anna's company. These are Risk-Allies, Origin Materials, Power School just did an IPO. We have a number of really impressive Reviver, compelling companies that are here, that are just folks from our town that stayed here to do it versus went down to San Jose or Menlo Park and went to where they thought was the promised land. And the more that happens, eventually it's going to happen where we're going to have someone, because what they tell us we don't have, we already have. Yeah. We have plenty of winners, plenty of competence, plenty of talent. We're going to need somebody that seals that reputation. Someone's going to have to, either collectively get so dynamic that we overwhelm them, or we're going to need somebody, to hit it out of the park. It'd be not necessarily an Instagram, but
yeah. Well, if Grin could blow up and become the next Shopify or something like that, it's possible, because once you get enough momentum and critical mass, it's frothy out there. People will back you if you're winning.
Yeah.
We could go on for a while here. Why don't I let you close it out with some closing thoughts to small business venture capital of Sacramento. And just closing thoughts from the man, Mr. Economic Development, the guy if we Google Sac Biz, you come up. You are the most known business guy in the region. So let's have some final words from Barry Broome.
When you were 22 years old and you were getting ready to get out of college, and you'd read self-help books and all kinds of things to get yourself ready for this venture in life. You had a little voice in your head that told you maybe you could do something special or big, and then yet, maybe your fraternity brothers told you, you were lucky to get a job pushing a mop. One of the things that I'm a big believer in is what you think you will become. I was with Chris Johnson, the entrepreneur ramen guy, Shark Tank, and he's a fun guy to hang around, because he's
the best.
He's locked and loaded 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And there is no off button with Chris.
I would love to hear a conversation between you two, right? Because he is, a tremendous public speaker.
Yeah, he's a fantastic guy. And he and I were talking about it. So once it's locked in your head, you're unstoppable, man. Yeah. And that's what we got to do as a community. Lock it in our head. And then the business leaders, the second challenge is lock it in your mind is, people wax and wane. How many of our friends are saying, do I keep staying here and going through this California experience that's increasingly making me uncomfortable? Or I just get the heck out of here and go to Texas. Do I finally go to Nevada? Do I just get out, And one of the things, and that's where you got to, we used to say this in Cleveland, you got to have a scab on your nose. You know what I mean? You got to have a chip on the shoulder and a scab on your nose. I used to work for a mayor who used to say that I like a guy with a scab on his nose. Somebody that's, been in an alley fight, maybe took a couple of punches and still keeps coming. There's no reason in the world why any Californian should ever let the political leadership of their government convince them they should leave their home without us fighting that government. And I don't mean it in a radical sense, some, crazy sense, but I mean, I'm not going to let the government run me out of California. Yeah. I'm not going to let failed political leaders run me out of my town. I'm going to run them out of office before I let them run me out of town.
We're going to end it on that. We are not going to let political leaders run us out of our own town where we raised our kids, where our grandkids are. We're going to let them run us out of our town? I don't think so. Barry Broome, Greater Sacramento Economic Council, and obviously very inspiring. Thank you, Barry, for everything that you do for this hometown that I love.
Hey, thank you. And you're one of the real leaders, so thank you, Mark.
You bet.
Thanks for watching today's show. My goal for every episode is that you find a takeaway, something tangible you can use in your business today. And if you have a comment about a favorite takeaway, feel free to put it in in the box below. And if you have a topic that you'd like me to bring up on the show, don't forget to let me know. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to learn more about entrepreneurship. Because at Haney Biz, we are always by your side.